What if the person sleeping next to you every night doesn't actually know who you are? I'm not talking about secrets like surprise gifts or old memories you never shared. I'm talking about the kind of secret that can end a marriage in one afternoon. Sigh, I never planned to hide anything from my husband. That's the part people don't understand. I didn't wake up one day and say, let me lie to the man I've spent my life with. No, it started quietly, slowly, almost harmless. I'm 67 years old now, and for most of my life I believed I was in a good marriage. A boring one maybe, but safe, predictable, the kind of marriage people admire from the outside. 32 years together. 32 years of routines, shared holidays, inside jokes, and quiet evenings where nothing really happened. My husband and I lived in a modest two-story house in a calm neighborhood where people waved at each other and kids rode bikes until sunset. He was respected, I was reliable, we were fine. That's the word I used for years. Fine, haha, funny how that word hides so much. I worked from home as a consultant. He thought it was small work, simple work, nothing impressive. I let him think that, not because I wanted to deceive him, but because he never asked, he never cared. Our finances were always separate, his pension, my work. We split bills evenly, no arguments, no drama. It worked for decades, so why change it? That's what I told myself. And when my income slowly grew, I didn't announce it, I didn't celebrate it, I just kept going, month after month, year after year. The money went into an account under my name only. Quiet, clean, no noise, and before you judge me, let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever sensed that telling the truth might cost you peace? Because that's what I felt. A small knot in my chest every time I thought about saying something. That little voice that says, maybe not yet. At first I told myself I'd explain everything later, when the timing felt right, when things were calmer, when I felt safer. But life doesn't pause for perfect moments, does it? It just keeps moving, and the secret stayed. $37,000 a month, sitting there like a silent wall between us. He had no idea, not even a clue. Or at least that's what I believed. I truly thought I was careful. I thought I was smart. I thought love, history, and routine were enough to protect me. Looking back now, that confidence feels almost embarrassing. Because the truth is, the moment someone starts asking the wrong questions, your whole world can shift. And it didn't start with yelling, it didn't start with accusations. It started with a calm voice on a random morning. Too calm. The kind of calm that makes your skin prickle for no reason. The kind that makes you pause mid-sip of coffee and think, why does this feel strange? That morning felt normal until it didn't. The house was quiet. The sunlight came through the kitchen window just like always. Same table, same cups, same life. And yet something was already breaking, even though I couldn't see it yet. I still remember thinking, we're safe, we're stable, nothing big ever happens to people like us. Oh, how wrong I was, because that ordinary morning was the last moment of peace I would have for a very long time. And I didn't know it yet, but one piece of paper, just one, was already on its way to destroying everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you stopped paying attention to the little changes? That's what scares me the most when I look back now. Not the secret itself, but how comfortable I became believing nothing could go wrong. Our marriage had settled into a rhythm that felt permanent. Wake up, coffee, quiet mornings. He read the paper, I answered emails. Evenings were simple, dinner, television, sometimes silence that wasn't awkward, just familiar. We didn't fight about money, we didn't fight about much at all. People think that's the dream, don't they? A calm marriage, no drama, no shouting, but calm can also mean distance. It can mean no curiosity about the person sitting across from you. And I didn't notice how little he asked about my life because I had gotten used to it. He was proud of his past, his career, his reputation. I was supportive. Always supportive. When I told people what I did for work, I kept it vague. Consultant, freelance, numbers, boring stuff. He never corrected me, never added anything. Sometimes I wondered if he even listened. I told myself that separate finances were a sign of trust. Independence. Modern marriage, right? He had his pension deposited into his account. I had my income into mine. We split groceries, utilities, repairs, 50-50. Clean and simple, no arguments, no tracking, no resentment, or so I thought. The truth is, we had created two parallel lives that barely touched, and parallel lines don't collide until suddenly they do. The first time I felt something was off, it wasn't obvious, it was almost polite. One afternoon, out of nowhere, he asked how work was going. I remember pausing because that question was rare. Fine, I said automatically. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on me a second too long. Busy, he asked. I laughed softly. Always. That noticed me, not smiled, not joked, just nodded again. I shrugged it off. Everyone has quiet days. But then came another question a week later, then another. How many clients did I have now? Were they local or remote? Did they pay well? The questions were wrapped in casual tones, but they stacked up in my mind like books on a shelf. Why now? I asked myself. For decades, he never cared. He trusted me, or worse, he ignored me. And then one evening, while washing dishes, he said something that made my hands stop mid-motion. Do you think married couples should share everything? His voice was calm, curious, almost philosophical. Water ran over my fingers while my heart started beating faster for no clear reason. What do you mean? I asked. He shrugged. Money, accounts, transparency, full openness. I laughed lightly, trying to keep it casual. We've never done that. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. People change. That's when the unease crept in, not panic, not fear. Just a quiet awareness that something had shifted. I started replaying moments in my head, his sudden interest, his subtle pauses, his habit of lingering near my office door, and then I noticed other things. He'd ask when I was done working. He'd comment on how focused I seemed. Once he joked, "You must be making a fortune in there." I laughed. Ha ha ha. I laughed too quickly, too loudly, and afterward I hated myself for it. Because laughter can be a shield, but it can also be a giveaway. I began locking my office door more often. I organized my files obsessively. I checked my statements twice before printing anything. I told myself I was being careful, but really I was being afraid. Afraid of a reaction I couldn't predict. Afraid of how easily money can change the way people look at you. Especially people who think they already own a part of you, and yet part of me still believed I was overthinking. After all, this was my husband, 32 years, shared history, shared life. Surely he wouldn't see me as a bank account. Surely love would outweigh numbers. That thought feels so naive now. What I didn't realize then was that curiosity isn't always innocent. Sometimes it's hunger, sometimes it's calculation. And sometimes, when someone starts asking questions they never cared about before, it's not because they suddenly want to understand you. It's because they're trying to figure out what they can take. I wish I had trusted my instincts sooner. I wish I had asked him why. I wish I had prepared myself emotionally for what was coming. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I stayed polite. I stayed married. And while I was busy convincing myself that everything was still fine, he was already looking for proof. I didn't hide my money because I was greedy. I need to say that clearly, even if my voice shakes while I say it. Sigh, people love simple stories. Wife hides money, husband finds out, wife must be wrong. But life is never that clean. The truth is, I hid my income because something inside me told me to be careful. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet warning that sat in my chest and refused to go away. When the work first started paying well, I was excited. Of course I was, who wouldn't be? After years of steady but modest earnings, suddenly my skills were valued. Big companies, serious problems, real responsibility. I worked long hours, sometimes late into the night, solving financial messes most people never see. It felt good. It felt earned. And when the first large payment came in, I remember staring at my screen and laughing softly to myself. Ha ha ha, is this real? I told myself I'd tell my husband soon, that evening, that weekend, some perfect moment that never arrived, and then one night everything changed. I was walking past the hallway when I heard his voice from the other room. He was on the phone with his brother. I wasn't trying to listen. I really wasn't, but my name floated through the air and I froze without even meaning to. He laughed and said, "If she ever starts making real money, I'll be set for life." I remember my breath catching. I stood there, heart pounding, listening as he went on. "We're married, what's hers is mine. That's how it works." He said it so casually, like it was obvious, like I was an asset, not a partner. I didn't confront him, I didn't storm into the room. I just stood there, feeling something crack open inside me. It wasn't anger at first, it was disappointment, deep, heavy disappointment, the kind that makes you feel small and exposed. That night, lying in bed next to him, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. I would protect myself, quietly, carefully, from the person who was supposed to protect me too, so I opened a separate account. I kept my work private, I downplayed my success. I told him I did bookkeeping, small consulting jobs, nothing serious. He accepted it without question. That should have told me everything. The money grew, month after month, $37,000 at a time. I invested it, saved it. Treated it like a safety net, not a weapon. I didn't spend wildly, I didn't change my lifestyle. I still drove the same car, lived in the same house, cooked the same meals. On the outside, nothing changed. Inside, though, I was always a little tense. Every time he walked past my office, every time he glanced at my desk, every time the mail arrived, I lived with this low-level fear that one day something would slip, a paper left out. A number seen, and yet I also lived with guilt. Was I doing something wrong? I asked myself that often. Hiding money from your spouse doesn't feel good, even when you believe you have a reason. Some nights I lay awake thinking, maybe I'm being unfair, maybe I'm projecting, maybe he wouldn't react the way I fear, but then I'd remember his voice on that phone call. The certainty, the entitlement. And the guilt would fade, replaced by caution. You see, I wasn't hiding money to leave him. I wasn't planning an escape. I was planning security. There's a difference. One is betrayal, the other is survival. I wish more people understood that. I wish I had understood it sooner myself, because hiding something like this changes you. It makes you watchful, it makes you quiet, it makes you question every interaction. And when he started asking questions about my work, that old explainable fear came rushing back. The warning I had ignored for years suddenly felt urgent. My instincts were screaming, he's getting close. And the worst part, I still hoped I was wrong. I still believed love might override greed. All that hope can be dangerous, because hope makes you delay action. Hope makes you hesitate when you should prepare. I didn't know it yet, but my careful little system was about to collapse. Not because I made a mistake, but because someone I trusted decided it was time to stop pretending. And when that happened, there would be no hiding, no explaining, no going back. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and something is off, even though nothing looks different. That was the moment everything changed for me. I had been out running simple errands, grocery bags in my hands, my mind on nothing important at all. Dinner plans, maybe a call with a client later, ordinary thoughts. I opened the front door and stepped inside, and the house felt wrong, too quiet, heavy, like the air had thickened while I was gone. I remember calling his name, no answer. I set the bags down slowly, my stomach tightening for reasons I couldn't explain, and then I saw the light on in my home office. My heart dropped. He never went in there, not once in all these years. I walked toward the room, each step slower than the last, and when I reached the doorway, I saw him standing by my desk. He was holding something in his hand, a piece of paper, my bank statement. Time did something strange in that moment. Everything felt stretched, unreal. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven. He didn't look angry, that's what scared me the most. He looked focused, calm, calculating. He looked up at me slowly, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the number printed at the top of the page. 37,000, he said quietly, not a question, a fact. Every month, I felt dizzy. My mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. You shouldn't be in here. He ignored that. He kept staring at the paper like it was a treasure map. For how long? He asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He let out a short breath, almost a laugh. Years, he said to himself. It had to be years. Then he looked at me again, and something in his eyes had changed. The warmth I had known for decades was gone, replaced by a cold certainty that made my skin crawl. Do you have any idea how much money this is? He said. Do you have any idea what this means? I stepped closer, my hands shaking. Put that down, that's private, he smiled. Not kindly, not gently. Private, he repeated. We're married, there is no private. That sentence hit harder than any insult could have. I realized in that moment that he didn't feel betrayed, he didn't feel confused. He felt entitled. He folded the paper neatly and slipped it into his pocket like it already belonged to him. Half of this is mine, he said calmly, and a lawyer will agree. My chest tightened. This isn't how it works, I whispered. He shrugged, we'll see, and just like that he walked past me, brushing my shoulder as he left the room. I stood there, frozen, the grocery bag still sitting by the door, milk warming, vegetables wilting, life unraveling silently. I didn't cry, not yet. I just stood there, staring at my desk, my chair, the space where my sense of safety used to be. When I finally moved, it was to sit down because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment I was afraid of. That night we didn't talk. I slept in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, doing math in my head because numbers were the only thing that still made sense. 8 years. 37,000 a month, millions of dollars, and now he knew, and knowing didn't soften him, it sharpened him. The next morning he acted like everything was normal, made coffee, read the paper. Then without looking at me he said, I've already spoken to an attorney. My stomach dropped. You hid marital assets, he continued calmly. That doesn't look good in court. The word echoed in my head like a gunshot. You sued me, I asked. He finally looked at me then, and his eyes were confident, too confident. Not yet, he said, but I will. And in that moment I understood something terrifying. This wasn't a fight between two hurt people. This was a plan, a calculated move. He wasn't reacting, he was executing. And as I sat there, coffee untouched, hands trembling in my lap, I realized the man I had trusted for 32 years was no longer my husband. He was my opponent. When your husband sues you, something inside you breaks in a way that's hard to explain. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, like a thin string snapping somewhere deep in your chest. The papers arrived 3 days later, not by him. Not with a conversation, but through a stranger who knocked on my door, handed me an envelope, and said my name like it was just another task on a list. I signed without really reading, my hands trembling, my mouth dry. As soon as the door closed, I sat down on the floor and laughed, not because it was funny, but because my mind couldn't decide whether to cry or scream, so it chose laughter instead. The words on those pages felt unreal. Petition for equitable distribution, concealment of marital assets, entitlement to 50%, 50%. He wanted half of everything I had earned, half of the money I worked nights for, half of the security I built quietly, carefully, out of fear and foresight. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, doing calculations over and over like a broken record. If the court sided with him, if they believed his story, he could walk away with more than $1 million. My money, my effort, my years, and the worst part wasn't the number. It was the realization that he had been waiting for this moment. The calmness, the confidence, the way he spoke about lawyers like this was already decided. The next morning, he sat across from me at the kitchen table like nothing had changed, coffee steaming, toast on a plate. "You should get a lawyer," he said casually. "This will go faster if you cooperate." Cooperate sighed, that word burned, as if this was a misunderstanding we could clear up, as if my silence had been a crime instead of caution. I wanted to ask him why now, why not talk to me, why turn this into a legal battle, but I already knew the answer, because once money enters the room, conversations leave. I felt small that day, I'll admit it, I felt stupid. I questioned myself constantly. Maybe I was wrong, maybe I should have told him earlier, maybe hiding the money made me the villain. Guilt has a way of sneaking in when you're exhausted, and I was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, physically. But somewhere between the second sleepless night and the third cup of cold coffee, something shifted. I started reading the papers carefully, line by line, slowly, and I noticed something. His language wasn't emotional, it was strategic. It wasn't about hurt, it was about entitlement, and that scared me more than anger ever could, because anger fades, strategy doesn't. I realized then that if I stayed frozen, if I let guilt lead, I would lose everything. Not just money, but dignity, so I made a decision, a quiet one. I would stop reacting and start preparing. That afternoon, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a woman I had once helped professionally, a lawyer, a sharp one. When she answered, I didn't cry, I didn't explain everything, I just said, "I need help." She listened, really listened, and when I finished, she said something that made me sit up straight. "Men don't usually wake up one day and sue their wives over money, there's always a reason." That sentence stayed with me, there's always a reason. Suddenly his confidence made sense, the rush, the certainty, the lack of hesitation. He wasn't guessing, he was counting on something, and I intended to find out what. But before I could dig deeper, before I could even fully process what was happening, I realized something else. I was no longer fighting just for money. I was fighting for the truth, and whatever he was hiding, I was about to uncover it. Before I continue, let me say this. If stories like mine make you pause, think, or feel less alone, make sure you subscribe. These stories aren't just entertainment, sometimes they're warnings. And sometimes they're mirrors, because what I found next changed everything I thought this lawsuit was about. I wish I could say this was really about money, that would make it easier, cleaner, numbers can be argued, calculated, fixed, but what I found next had nothing to do with spreadsheets or bank accounts. It was personal, deeply personal. And it hurt in a way I didn't know was still possible at my age. It started late one evening when he was out of the house. Poker night, he called it. Same excuse every week. I didn't plan to snoop, I truly didn't. But once doubt enters your heart, silence becomes unbearable. I sat at my desk staring at my screen for a long time before I moved. My hands felt heavy, my chest tight. I told myself, just one look. I knew his computer password. He had never bothered to change it, our anniversary date backwards. Funny how symbols of love can turn into keys for betrayal. When his email opened, I expected confusion. Maybe financial questions, maybe messages with his lawyer. What I didn't expect was her name. Cheryl, over and over again, dozens of emails, weeks, months. My heart dropped into my stomach. I clicked one, then another. The words blurred at first, then sharpened as reality sank in. They weren't subtle, they weren't careful, they were intimate, familiar, loving. He called her my escape. She called him my future. I felt sick. I had to stop reading for a moment because my vision went dark around the edges. I remember whispering, "Oh my God," to an empty room. But the worst part wasn't the affair itself, it was the planning, the calculation. One email made my hands start shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the desk. He wrote, "Once I get my half of her money, we won't have to worry anymore. My lawyer says it's almost guaranteed." Almost guaranteed. He talked about condos, vacations, a new life funded by me, by money I earned while he slept peacefully beside me. Cheryl replied, asking what would happen if I fought back. His response was calm, confident. "She won't. She's too honest, she'll feel guilty and settle." I laughed out loud when I read that. Ha ha ha, not because it was funny, but because the arrogance was unreal. He thought guilt would save him, that my decency would be his weapon. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, feeling something inside me change. The fear that had followed me for weeks disappeared. In its place was clarity, cold, sharp. This wasn't a husband reacting emotionally. This was a man executing a plan. The lawsuit wasn't about fairness, it was funding. I forwarded every email to myself, took screenshots, saved everything. Then I closed the computer and sat back, breathing slowly. I expected to cry. I expected rage, that didn't come either. What I felt was resolve, pure and steady. The puzzle pieces finally fit, his sudden interest in my income, his confidence, his rush to involve lawyers. He wasn't shocked by my earnings. He was excited by them. That night when he came home, I looked at him differently. He smiled like nothing was wrong, asked if I'd eat, told me poker was boring. I nodded, calm, quiet. Inside, my heart was pounding, but my face stayed still, because now I knew the truth. And the truth was this: he underestimated me. He thought honesty made me weak. He thought silence meant surrender. But silence can also mean preparation. And while he believed he was already winning, I was just beginning to fight back. People think quiet women don't fight back, that if you don't shout or slam doors, you don't have strength. Sigh, I used to believe that too, but silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's focus, sometimes it's strategy. After reading those emails, I didn't confront him. Not that night, not the next morning. I smiled when I needed to. I answered politely. I watched. Because once you know the truth, you stop reacting emotionally and start thinking clearly. And clarity is dangerous. The first call I made was to my lawyer. When she answered, I didn't explain everything in order. The words spilled out, messy and heavy. The hidden income, the lawsuit, the emails, the affair, the plan. When I finished, there was a pause, then she said something that grounded me instantly. Good, you found this now. Not I'm sorry, not that's terrible, just good, because now we control the narrative. Those words felt like oxygen. She told me to gather everything: bank statements, emails, old records, anything that showed patterns, and as I started pulling files, another memory surfaced, something I had pushed aside years ago because I didn't want conflict. 3 years earlier, he had taken out a home equity loan, $50,000. He said it was for renovations. We never renovated anything. At the time, I questioned him lightly. He brushed it off, said it was handled. I let it go. Oh, I wish I hadn't, but now that forgotten detail felt important. I mentioned it to my lawyer. Her tone changed instantly. That's not small, she said. That's potentially everything. We started tracing the money, slowly, carefully. And what we found made my stomach turn. Payments that didn't match our lifestyle, withdrawals that didn't make sense, travel charges, gifts, rent, all leading back to her. Cheryl, he hadn't just planned to use my money. He had already been using ours, marital money, without telling me, while smiling at me across the dinner table. When my lawyer laid it out clearly, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just betrayal, this was theft. That night when he came home, I was sitting calmly in the living room, papers neatly stacked on the table. He noticed immediately. What's all this? He asked, irritation creeping into his voice. I looked up. I hired a lawyer, I said simply. His face changed. You're escalating this. I smiled softly. No, I said, I'm responding. I mentioned the loan, the missing money, the inconsistencies. His confidence cracked just a little. That's none of your business, he snapped. It absolutely is, I replied. It's marital money. He scoffed, but I could see it now, the fear just a flicker, enough. Over the next few days, the balance shifted. He called more often, asked questions. Tried to sound reasonable, but it was too late. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't confused. I knew exactly who I was dealing with, a man who thought planning made him powerful. He didn't realize I had spent my entire career fixing messes created by people like him. Financial messes, strategic messes, and this was just another problem to solve. Quietly, precisely. And just when I thought he would retreat, when I thought he might try to negotiate through lawyers like a normal person, he did something reckless, something desperate. He brought her into my life, into my house. And that's when things truly exploded. Nothing prepares you for being threatened in your own living room. Not books, not age, not experience. When I opened the door and saw him standing there with her, my mind went completely blank for a second, just white noise. Then my heart started racing so fast I thought I might faint. He said her name casually, like this was normal. Like bringing the woman you're having an affair with to your wife's house is a reasonable thing to do. Cheryl stepped inside first, confident, well-dressed, too comfortable. She looked around my home like she was already imagining changes. New furniture, new life. He followed behind her, avoiding my eyes. They sat on my couch. And that's when I understood something very clearly. This wasn't a visit, this was a power move. We don't want this to get ugly, he said, folding his hands together like a businessman. Cheryl smiled. We're willing to be fair. Fair. Ha ha ha, I almost laughed again. They laid it out plainly. A settlement, $1 million, cash, no court, no public mess, just go away money. My ears rang. I stared at them, waiting to feel panic. It didn't come. What I felt instead was disbelief. The audacity. The way they spoke about my life like it was a negotiation table. Cheryl leaned forward and said something that made my stomach twist. If you don't agree, people will find out what kind of woman you really are. Hiding money from your husband, that won't look good. There it was, the threat, reputation, shame, fear. He added quietly, I still have respect in this town. People will believe me. My hands were cold, but my voice stayed steady. Get out of my house. Cheryl laughed, sharp and dismissive. You're making a mistake. I stood up then, slowly. The mistake was trusting you, I said, looking straight at him, and the mistake you're making now is thinking I'm scared. I gave them my offer, $0. In exchange, I wouldn't press charges for theft and fraud. The room went silent. Cheryl's smile disappeared, his face hardened, they left angry, muttering threats as they walked out. When the door closed, my legs gave out, I slid down to the floor and started shaking. Not crying, shaking. Because I had just declared war on the man I once loved, and I knew he wouldn't forgive that. That night he called, then texted, then sent letters, apologies, memories, promises, manipulation wrapped in nostalgia. I burned the letter without reading it twice. When guilt didn't work, fear followed. When fear didn't work, rage came next. He showed up again days later. Alone this time, flowers in his hand, tears in his eyes, performance perfect. He begged, he threatened, he whispered about criminal charges, tax fraud, ruin. I saw through it all. Cheryl's car parked down the street gave him away. I closed the door in his face. After that, I didn't sleep much. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was resolved. Because when someone shows you they're willing to destroy you to win, the only option left is to stand your ground. And the courtroom was waiting. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I don't know why I imagined something grand, dramatic like in movies. This was plain, wood panels, hard benches, fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired and exposed. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, feeling my heartbeat in my ears. Across the room, he sat straight-backed, confident, whispering to his lawyer like a man who believed the ending was already written. Cheryl was there too, sitting behind him, dressed carefully, watching me like I was an obstacle instead of a human being. When the judge entered, the room went quiet in a way that felt heavy. She didn't smile, she didn't frown. She looked like someone who had seen every story people bring into a courtroom and wasn't impressed by performances. That alone gave me a strange sense of calm. His lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of betrayal. A devoted husband, a dishonest wife, secret income, broken trust. I listened, my face still, even when my stomach twisted. He talked about fairness, about entitlement, about how marriage meant sharing everything. And as he spoke, I realized something. He wasn't talking to me, he was selling a story. When my lawyer stood up, her voice was steady, clear. She didn't raise it, she didn't dramatize anything. She started with facts, numbers, dates, records. Then she introduced the emails. The room shifted, you could feel it. As my husband's words appeared on the screen, the same words I had read alone in my office, I heard a sharp intake of breath behind me. Cheryl. The judge leaned forward slightly. My husband's confidence faltered for the first time. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightened. When the email about getting half of her money was read aloud, I felt something release inside me, not joy. Not revenge, just relief. The truth was no longer mine to carry alone. Then came the question that changed everything. The judge looked at him and asked calmly, "Where did the $50,000 go?" Silence, thick, uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, gave half answers, contradicted himself. The more he spoke, the worse it sounded. My lawyer laid out the proof. The withdrawals, the trips, the rent payments, jewelry, all of it, all leading back to Cheryl. The judge didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. When she finally spoke, the words landed like a quiet hammer. She said his actions showed planning, deception, and misuse of marital assets. She said hiding income was not a crime. But stealing from a marriage to fund an affair was. I looked at him then. His face had gone pale, not angry, not defiant, empty, like a man realizing too late that confidence isn't the same as being right. Cheryl stood up suddenly, then sat back down, wiping her face. My husband didn't look at her. He didn't look at me either. He stared at the table like it might open and swallow him. When the judge finished reading her decision, I felt lightheaded. She ruled in my favor, completely. He would get nothing from my income. Nothing. He would repay what he took. He would cover my legal fees. As the gavel came down, a sound escaped my chest that surprised me. Not a sob, not a laugh, just a long breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. It was over, or so I thought, because winning in court doesn't end a story. It only changes who you are when you walk out the door. Winning doesn't feel the way people imagine it does. There was no music, no celebration, no sudden rush of happiness. When the courtroom emptied and people began moving again, I just sat there for a moment, staring at the wooden table in front of me. My hands were steady now, but my chest felt hollow, like something heavy had finally been lifted and taken something else with it. He walked past me without looking up, slower than before, smaller somehow. I caught his eye for just a second and saw regret, anger, and something else I couldn't name. Maybe shame, maybe loss. "I hope you're satisfied," he muttered. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long while I felt nothing. "I'm not satisfied," I said quietly. "I'm finished." Outside the courthouse, the air felt sharper, cleaner. My lawyer squeezed my hand and said we had done it, that the ruling was strong, that the law was clear. I nodded, listening, but my mind was already drifting forward, toward silence, toward rest. The divorce was finalized quickly after that. He moved out with a few boxes, his office furniture, his clothes, that was it. The house felt different without him. Lighter. I repainted the bedroom. I opened windows I had kept closed for years. I slept better than I had in a decade. The money stayed where it belonged, but it stopped being the center of my thoughts. It was security, yes, freedom, but not identity. My identity came back in quieter ways. Long walks, coffee on the porch, laughing with friends who told me, "We always wondered why you stayed so small." I traveled alone for the first time in my life and realized I wasn't lonely. I was peaceful. I met new people, not because I needed them, because I wanted to, and somewhere in that calm I understood something important. The money was never the real secret. The real secret was my strength. I had spent years shrinking, adjusting, staying quiet to keep peace, and when that peace was threatened, I discovered I didn't need permission to protect myself. If you're listening to this and you're standing at the edge of a decision that scares you, trust yourself. Protect what you've earned, protect who you are, because the moment you stop apologizing for your survival, everything changes. And if this story stayed with you, if it made you feel seen or understood, subscribe for more real stories like this. You never know which one might give you the courage you need.